There'll be a link to this Alan Watts talk that I'm referring to in the description. Alan Watts has fascinated me for some time now, 20 years. It's the questions he asked, they're usually quite interesting and like not the usual kind of questions. And particularly the one I want to discuss is around this, am I doing it or is it doing me? Meaning, what is my control level? It applies both to the external and internal world, but also to the subconscious and the unconscious. Anyway, I'll just quickly discuss this this talk he gives. Alan Watts asks the question, and I think it's an interesting, important one, but his answer dismisses the individual consciousness as epiphenomenal, meaning it just rests on, it's like a unnecessary byproduct of nervous happening, which I'm afraid I have to completely disagree with. Epiphenomenalism actually is related to the mind-body problem, and I don't know, I've never heard him talk about it, so I'm not too sure if he just picked it up, because the discussion was, particularly in the monistic material position, is that certainly from a materialist perspective, if there's nothing else but material, then why do your thoughts seem to correspond to your actions? And they came up with this idea that, your mind's just a byproduct, and one of the ways was like everything's in clockwork, so everything was set in motion at the beginning of time, and your brain just going along with it is just like a narrator of unconnected narrator as well of what's going on. So it had, as far as they was concerned, it had no causal effect and is just a byproduct of the brain. You don't exist, he says. Your ego is an illusory image connected to attention of futile effort. Now, you see, I really like Watts, but sometimes he comes out with this stuff, and the statement that you don't exist is just crazy radical, really. And I have a problem with it. I understand to some extent where he's coming from, because he says, I feel there really is a me. And I do, yeah, there really is a me. But his point is that it's just epiphenomenal. And the reason that feeling's there is because he says it's connected to a tension of futile effort. So the example he gives is that when you're at school and trying to learn to read, you make this tremendous effort to do, which is, bad teaching, I would consider. But the effort to learn is associated with this I then. But the fact that someone is making an effort, it kind of defeats his idea straight away, doesn't it, really? I think, to some extent. Although, I don't know if he just, it's the strange thing about Watts, he comes out with this stuff that... Anyway, so what is ego? In common terms, it's considered self-worth. Psychologically, it's the mediator between conscious and unconscious, and philosophically, it's a conscious thinking subject. So, I think I is the interface between the external and internal of both the individual and the external world, because I kind of agree with, because he was, one of the lectures he gives is that it's called You Always Get What You Want. Basically, he's trying to say that there's no difference between the external world and the internal world, which is not entirely true. But it is certainly true that the external world is an extraordinary influence upon what you consider to be yourself. What is yourself is probably 99% the world. the external world, how the world is, like kind of a bit like astronomy. If you do a horoscope for the child being born, they'll take a picture of the stars and they'll say, because the thought is that it's the stars that influence how that child will develop. And although I don't think the stars have any particular effect, certainly the actual environment that you're born into definitely has a very strong effect on your psychology of who you are. Maybe 99% is a bit too much. I think it's about 90% actually. Well, whatever. It's a very large proportion. So there definitely is something to that. So he goes on to say, you are your thoughts and feelings. Well, yeah, but if I'm my thoughts and feelings, then surely I must exist then. Or I must be an actual, I must have real effective control over some things. But that's kind of ignored. One of the ways that I think is really quite interesting, and how you can look at this breakdown of internal and external, is breath. Is breath something you do, he asks. Well, yeah, it is in a way, because when I want to change my breathing, I can change my breathing. But when I just leave my breathing alone and concentrate on something else, my breathing just occurs by itself. So surely that shows that what is my subconscious is actually still me, and what I consider the conscious awareness, is like a continuation, like a specialised form of my subconscious. Like there's no difference. And we do see that the two are obviously completely connected, because things like the placebo effect. Why does the placebo effect work? Well, obviously because one's consciousness is affecting one's autonomic nervous system, the subconscious. So anyway, and then he goes on, do you organise your visions? Are you activating the nerves? Well, yeah, not consciously, that's true. But we'll come on to how you can consciously influence such things. You are a happening by spontaneous occurrence. Yeah, I mean that's quite important to realise. I think is that we just occur without any explanation, really, and that's obviously a big part of philosophy as well, isn't it? Why do we occur? Why is there consciousness? And so, yeah, no I to bring it about. Oh right, yeah. I mean, did I create my consciousness? No, that's obviously the wrong way around. That's obviously a bad thing. I mean, I think that's why he goes so radically into this. You do not exist, because obviously it makes no sense, does it? I mean, you can't say the consciousness of I created the consciousness of I. It's obviously ran the wrong way, that's not right. But and you can't control your mind. Well, yeah, not entirely. That's certainly true. Yeah, and obviously it's going to be different. There's going to be different levels for different people, and to some extent you can control. I think pretty much completely, to a large extent, over time you can control your mind, but not necessarily straight away. Like obviously one of his examples of this is don't think of a pink elephant. So of course, generally speaking, that's what you'll be thinking of. But yeah, it's the fact that humanity doesn't really seem to have probably grasped or understood, particularly in the terms of teaching. The way that most teaching is occurring is incorrect for the individual's ability to learn efficiently, accurately, and not get stuck in this whole idea that you can learn by brute force, because there's very little you can learn by brute force. You need to be more subtle and gentle with yourself. But we'll come on to this, come on to that in a little bit, because certainly to my understanding, it's a negotiation. You kind of have to negotiate with yourself. But yeah, so what highlights what the Buddha was saying is you are suffering because you desire. Stop desiring. But of course, this is impossible since the desire not to desire will still remain. It's also trickery because it doesn't show the impossible. It's impossible to remove desire because it's a self-referential paradox, which McGilchrist deals with. These self-referential things. They're same as like saying this sentence is false. Well, yeah, if it's true, it's false. If it's false, then it's true, and it just goes round and round like that. And there's no getting away from that fact. So yeah, it's kind of typical of these guys that they do have a point. I mean, obviously, desire. I mean, how much control does one have over one's desires? Very little, very minimal amount. But you can have a bit of control over them. But again, it's over time. It's not like bodily movements, which you have pretty much complete control over under normal circumstances. But nonetheless, anyone who no longer desires anything would probably not exist for very long due to dehydration, which would kill them very quickly. It's kind of silly. It sort of ignores the fact of why does that desire exist for food and water. Well, it was because of the physiological demands of one's biology. It has to be that way. And if those demands weren't turned into the desires you feel, then you wouldn't be around for very long. So yeah, it's a bit silly in that sense. So the thinker of the thoughts is just another thoughts, Watts reckons. Or the feeler is just another feeling. The experiencer just another experience. Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, no, I don't think it is just another thought. I think apart from just being, because obviously I has the episodic memory aspect to it as well, whereas I is associated with all these memories of volition, and in that sense that I thought is different from other thoughts for certain, and for real practical purposes as well. Why are we conscious? Well, why don't we just like wander around subconsciously? Well, it's almost certainly like what Gilchrist says about the splitting hemispheres. There's one side of us that is got a wider view of everything, almost like the subconscious, that's just taking in information without necessarily completely discerning it. Whereas the other side is very focused on one particular bit of the stimulus from the environment and our orientation to it and what we're going to be doing about it. It seems these seem like fairly obvious points to me, but they're somewhat missed. I'm not quite sure why, but that's why I'm doing this thing to clear this business up, because it's not, there really is an I. You really do have volition. Because that's been an important point in philosophy as well, isn't it? They often go on, like, some people turn totally deterministic and say that you're completely determined. No, you see, it's gone way too far one way again. It's a balance. I don't know where the balance, and I think individually it will vary from person to person, that balance is to some extent more or less in different people. And I think it can be changed as well, but that's down to the individual person. So, yeah, anyway. So, he goes on to say that, well, this is because verbs have to have nouns grammatically, or subjects. So how does a name create an action? Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not. That's not the case, and I think again, you see, it's confusion. Like we've used names to associate with the particular conscious aspects within the I, as we understand it, the actual happening of thoughts have been designated with this label, and no, that obviously the label doesn't do anything. So I mean, it should all be verbs. So there is a meing happening, and it's happening now and creating this, and yeah, it's a bit kind of. I don't really think that there's yeah. I mean, it's a curiosity. I mean, it just all I feel it does is tell one be very, very cautious about all the symbols that we've created for the world, because they're extremely misleading at times. They're only any good for basic communication. Everything else, you just want to throw them out and not really pay much attention to them, because they only have a loose association with the real world. Still, anyway, I mean, McGilchrist covers much more of that. So, without a knower, there can't be knowing. Yeah, obviously that's a bit silly, really, isn't it? That's again the same sort of thing, that everything has to be in a box, all neatly tied up together. And no, I think it's pretty clear that the universe just does things without being completely clear about any of it. So yeah, if I'll put up the diagram as of how I well, I mean, obviously I've put these terms down as what I can control and what I cannot control. So obviously physical movement is right at and action is pretty much complete control. And I've put breathing sort of in the middle, so it's 50-50. Or maybe it's a bit less, or maybe it's a bit more. But maybe it's a bit more actually in some ways, because when I choose to change my breathing, I've got instantaneous control over it. If I stop, if I'm stop breathing, I stop breathing for a bit, obviously, and then obviously my autonomic nervous system comes in with the fact that I need oxygen to do metabolic processes, so you better start taking in some more oxygen. So yeah, this is just a rough sort of diagram. I didn't think it's particularly accurate, but I've put digestion over down sort of 25%, and the reason why I've done that, I mean, although you don't really have control as in that much over the actual process, you do to some extent, because if you eat something and then try and do a lot of activity, you're going to struggle. So you can aid your digestion system with your mindset at the time. If you think digestion, I'm going to digest my food, and you do everything I'm certain I will be able to affect my digestion to some amount. I don't know, 20% or something like that. If I spent a lot of time just concentrating on that, I'm sure I could increase the efficiency of my digestion by some amount. But I mean, most of the time I'm doing other things, and I can't think about digestion. So I'm very pleased to just allow it to carry on just by itself. Yeah, I've put heartbeat over 0%. I've got no control whatsoever over that. Only roundabout control. If I do physical activity, I'm going to raise it. Or if I sit down in a chair and don't do anything, then it's going to lower. But yeah, so that's not direct control, it's indirect control. I put perception under 50%, because perception's a funny one. You look at attention, I put that far over sort of 75-80%, because and mental focus, because the focus part, yes, I do have pretty much complete control over. Perception, however, is different in the sense that you can attend to something, but what you perceive there is dependent on a lot of other things, particularly your mental framework, the mental framework that you put there. So I was going to use the analogy of the Where's Wally books. So you can attend to the picture of where Wally is, but it's the perception your perceptual apparatus mindset that is going to assist you or bring the image of where the image of Wally is in the book or not, depending on the case. So that's the difference between attention and perception. Attention is more the act of attending to the sense of whatever you're, attempting to perceive. Behaviour, again, I'll put it at sort of 50%, because obviously, I have complete control over physical movements, but I do not have, the behaviour I would consider to be the style of the physical movement. You see, I've only have a little bit of control over that. That's drifting more into subconscious, and that's, I think that's true of all behaviours. Although I have, it's a kind of 50-50. I have some control over behaviour, and over time, I can have considerably greater control over it. But certainly from an instantaneous point of view. That's one of the things that really has to be noted. There's a difference between what I have control over instantaneously and what I have control over time by both will, effort, and what I'm doing to ensure that my subconscious soaks up the direction in which I wish to change or become more acute or less acute or whatever. So this is why I put desires down here, because you can change your desires over time, but you can sort of stimulate your desires a bit, but yeah, quite a low amount of control. If I think 30% even might be a bit high even there. Sleep, I've put right down there. You lay down and go to sleep, but you don't have control over it. So much of sleep that's subconscious, pretty much. All you can do really with sleep it's quite a curious one, that, in the sense that it really highlights the fact that much of your conscious control, all it can do is just encourage yourself to go to sleep. You can't make yourself go to sleep. There's no effort of will that is going to make yourself go to sleep, really. Your effort of will needs to find the circumstances of a dark, quiet room, and if you really want to, like counting sleep or something like that, something that puts your mind in a calm state will increase your subconscious's ability to actually do the activity. So yeah, learning, I've put like 50% again, because so much of what we learn is not through just will, just brute force. It's kind of like sleep in a way. A lot of what you learn is learning, particularly where it's knowledge, like know-how knowledge, like riding a bike or playing football or fixing a car or doing something practical. That totally requires a lot of subconscious. But so does book learning as well. Obviously varying in different people, but book learning requires the cooperation of your memory. Because I've put that down below 50%, and people say, oh well, I recall this and that I can think of. Yeah, but you can often sometimes not be able to recall stuff. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's not there. And again, your subconscious will eventually kick that up, and trying to force your memory can force yourself to remember will show that. That's one of the things that Watts sort of really goes on about is the fact you can't force memory, and you can't force recollection, I should say. It's subconscious, really is, far more subconscious than I think we generally realise. But it's important to know these things, so you basically know how to use your brain a little bit more efficiently, really. Imagination, I've put 50-50. Again, sort of probably similar arguments to memory. Yeah, imagination we do have control over to some extent, but it's a cooperation. So much, in fact, nearly everything is a cooperation between these two different realms within ourselves. It's no good like, beating yourself up about things. That's not the way to do it. It's just going to be inefficient, and you're going to make your life much more harder than it needs to be. Instincts, I've put right down with like near zero control, pretty much, because instincts are sort of given by nature, and I'm not too sure, and your environment rather, and I'm not too sure if I'm almost 0%. I think it's just above. I think we do have the most minute little bit of control over our instincts, and over time we can influence them, but it's minuscule. Instincts are something that you can over time very slowly change. But feelings, I don't think we've got much more control over our feelings as well. Feelings are generally it's a kind of subconscious thing. So feelings and emotions, they're pretty much on the same par, really. You can evoke feelings within yourself. You do have quite good control over that, but to what things actually feel, I mean, they're related to instincts, and instincts are like presets generally from your biology. I mean, really fascinating as well. What are all these instincts? I mean, obviously, from a survival position, obviously your instincts exist because you won't survive very long in this crazy turbulent universe. But where do they come from? I mean, it's a big. I mean, you talk to people like Sheldrake, Rupert Sheldrake. He's got this whole morphogenetic field thing. He reckons similar to the ether, but it's information. Well, not information exactly. I don't know. Like some kind of resonant correspondence between the physical organism and its adaptive behaviours that somehow is sort of added to from time to time. But really interesting. I wish he'd actually start doing some actual scientific experiments on it, but yeah, I mean, he hasn't really done very much. The only ones he's done are not very, very convincing, certainly not conclusive anyway. Well, not that very much is in science, but they're not very convincing anyway. And so thoughts, I've put that maybe just above 50%, but barely. Well, like what says, you can't really control your thoughts that well. I mean, generally speaking, I don't like to control my thoughts anyway. I mean, I like my thoughts just to whirl round however they please. I find that's the most. I mean, other than when I'm actually trying to do something, then I prefer not to have lots of extraneous thoughts. But under general circumstances, there's not actually doing anything. I'm not directing my effort towards something in particular. Then I'm quite happy just to let my thoughts just stroll around. And I think if you're getting thoughts that you don't want, then that means that there's something within your psychology, something within your view of the world that is that needs work. Basically, it's important to work on oneself, about training yourself to into a mode of psychological cycles of ideas that tend to produce more of what you want to think about. That's where the control comes in. And so personality as well. Personality is, goodness me, there's very little control you have over that. I think I've put it a bit far up here, really. I think it's about 25%. I mean, there's elements that you can, over time, you can control some things, but I mean, you can hide sort of some aspects of your personality if you don't want them to appear. But it's very limited. Given any kind of distraction, those aspects of your personality you don't want to appear are going to pop out again because it's subconscious. You're taking because you're blocking it at one point. And as soon as you get distracted, you've got less effort to apply to that repression, and the subconscious just pops up with hello again. And you're like, oh, I don't want to see you, and the subconscious basically doesn't really care about that kind of stuff. It just does. It just is. So yeah, that's roughly my table of control, and I think it will vary for different people. Um, different people are gonna take, you know, gonna have a different take on all these different things. It's gonna apply in different ways to different people. So what I wanted to say a bit more about this thing is about what I actually control is sort of on how one could use this to improve oneself, because I think so. I'm sure that's what was related to with Watts. I think I've explained some of that, how one would use it to explain to improve oneself. I mean, a lot of it comes down to orientation. Your orientation to the moment, at the moment, sort of, so where you are, where you want to go, your direction, and then having a look at the amount of control that you have over that particular. So if it's over feelings or thoughts or something like that, and putting yourself in the environment which increases the thoughts that you, or the likelihood that you will think certain things, then not think those sort of things, and you have to work things that way. That's really the way our minds work, really, or way our minds are disposed to function, because they aren't just like it goes to this. A lot of conscious control is left hemisphere orientated. And McGilchrist's work is really quite highly related to that kind of aspect. So you don't necessarily have to read the big fat manual of things. He did a smaller book called The Master in His Emissary, which has roughly the same information, though like in less depth. So that, if you don't want to read that big fat book, then that might be an alternative. So basically, if you want to work on yourself, I just wanted to make sure that, or to say to Watts, or put, stick my oar in and say this is not the case. I really exist. I really am an effective change in the world, where I want to be. Well, effective, but limited, very limited. It's not that I don't have any control. The same as this determinism, free will thing. Yes, I have volition. I can change some things. A lot of the things I'm totally determined by at certain times, but also other times I have more leeway. And that was the thing, wasn't it? About negotiation. This is how you want to. This is the attitude you really need to take towards. Because it's yourself, I mean, even though you might not have conscious control over it, your breathing is still your breathing, your heartbeat is still your heartbeat, it is still you, it's just you in a different state, in a way more focused state, just focused in existing. So negotiation, be kind and gentle to yourself, because as a consciousness, your orientation, your consciousness is your orientation to the world. So the rest of you is relying on this orientation being accurate, because the rest of you is putting all this effort into it, and it's on the faith that you are going to look after it well and reward its hard effort and work. So, don't be authoritarian about taking this, and don't beat yourself up just because something doesn't happen straight off. That doesn't mean that it isn't going to happen. You have to work on these sort of things, just the nature of how we've developed in the world. Presumably, it's so difficult to say, really, but certainly in an evolutionary mindset, it's only about survival. So, I mean, that's obviously why we don't have very much control over many of those other functions, or indeed any control over such things, because they don't. There's no survival demand. There's no reason from a survival perspective that you would have control over such things, because they're taken care of already. You know, like all the balance of nerves and so on and so forth. That's all autonomic nervous system, and you have no control over that really. Although again, see, not no control absolutely completely, because if you put yourself in a dangerous state, those hormones and chemicals within your body of alertness, like adrenaline and norepinephrine or something like that, those different will increase. So in that sense, we can change those things, but just not quite directly. But yeah, nonetheless. So forget about the master and slave division. So also related to this is I wanted to just quickly discuss the justice, laws, reality, and Anki, or Ananki, necessity. Justice is the common definition is fairness. Legally, it's conformity to law. Plato's definition, this is out of the Republic, is knowing one's place and doing one's job. Out of the Republic as well, Socrates says it's not the property of the just man to treat anyone badly, which is almost like a Jesus Christ kind of do unto others as you would expect to be done to yourself, as justice. And yeah, I think that's right. I think, you know, that is justice, but at the same time, it's a bit more complicated than that, and it's got confused, I think, to some extent, by moral law. In fact, all laws are constructed by the society in which they are developed. Even physical laws are, you know, constructed. No law exists in nature. What are called laws are interpretations of constant patterns and behaviours. They're rules of a model. They're constructed from observation. And this is why I wanted to talk about Ananki, or necessity, the inevitable patterns of behaviour, what science calls laws. In things like thermodynamics, heat always moves towards cold because heat is the release of molecular vibration. So it's necessarily going to happen that way by the very fact of its substance, fact of its the properties of that substance mean that it is going to behave in that way. And that's why I think we should see all law, all regularities within the universe. It's not created by some kind of rule talker, by some kind of entity that says this is how it is, and it could be some other way. It can't be any other way by the very nature of its property. And if it could be, then your law is completely arbitrary, and to my mind is like pretty much worthless unless you're playing some silly game. It must move towards the cold to release its energy. Similarly, in fluid dynamics, shows a volume of higher pressure flowing to that of a lower pressure, in the same way that on the side of a hill, a ball. I did put that. I just misread that. Ball on the side of a hill will roll down. Well, exactly, because everything is moving towards the centre of the planet at 9.8 metres per second until an equal or greater opposition halts or changes its direction. It's by the very fact of the substance of the ball and the surface that it's on and the motion of the planet. This is inevitable. It absolutely must occur that way until there is an equal or greater opposition to that movement. I.e., ordinarily, when it's at rest, is when it gets onto the ground. So it gets onto flat ground. It's then in balance. The opposing and they equal out. So I I think it's important because there is a danger from constant use of man-made interpretations of the universe, of a disconnection from the truth of reality. These are interpretations of reality and relevant to the realization that moral laws are the same. They're interpretations of reality and entirely man-made. This whole morality it's so culturally dependent. That's what I'm quite interested in philosophy and the ancient Greek philosophy, and all too often what tends to get overlooked here is that these ideas are culturally constructed in a particular culture. I really want to know what is the natural necessities and regularities of behaviour within the universe, which is why I put this dual unity, i.e. there's extremes of a whole, like black and white. In fact, Alan Watts covers that as well. It's really important that you've got black and white. They're completely different, and yet they're totally the same in that they're the extremes of colour. So they're like unchangeable aspects that are necessarily true by dint of the universe as it is. So reciprocity and equilibrium. So action and reaction. This sort of relates to the Jesus Christ, do unto others, as this reciprocity there. If you do good things to others, then you should expect. It's also been used in that whole idea of karma, but it breaks down there because, as I understood, the way a lot of people think of karma is that there's a book. Well, in fact, it does in the Christianity, doesn't it? There's a book of your good actions and your bad actions. I think that's nonsense. There's no evidence that I see. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to say that definitely isn't the case. Other than there is a bit of reciprocity, because if you go around acting like all arrogant and tough and pushing people around, eventually people are going to get annoyed about that and start trying to push you back around. And maybe they'll fail, but maybe you'll push around someone who looks really weak, but they're actually really quite strong, and they smack you into the ground. And that's what the reciprocity is, and to an equilibrium. So it's seen in terms like all men are created equal in the American Constitution. There is a natural equilibrium. Well, it's the same with physical materials, isn't it? Every physical, like electricity or pressure or heat, is trying to find an equal state. It's trying to find the neutral point where it's not more one way than the other, and that's a really important point of the universe. So I put action reaction. The reason why I have a bit of a problem with this in regards to and why I ended up going on this little trip is the problem is the very nature of the universe itself, whereas we tend to need to kill other living creatures to survive. So obviously you get people like the Jainists and some of the Buddhists who they're like super vegetarian. They won't eat plants. They just eat fruits and nuts, and that's all they'll eat, because then you could eat fruits and nuts and not kill anything to survive. But there seems to be a bit of a problem with that. I don't know if it's because over time our ancestors have done it, and the thought is that we need we need proteins from meat to keep us healthy now. That's a big problem, because I would say, certainly as far as reciprocity and equilibrium is concerned, that all creatures have a right to life, and we shouldn't take it away from them. And yet, I like to eat meat. I do eat meat, and yeah, it sort of seems immoral. So I wonder if that's what the Christians mean by you're fundamentally immoral due to what your ancestors did. Well, at the same time, I'd say, well, obviously there ain't nothing I could have done about what my ancestors did. So it kind of defeats the point of ethics as well. It's a mess. It's typical of this universe. It's so confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. Even though it behaves like a machine a lot of the time as well, like physical laws. They're pretty much always seen as like, well, you can be. You can model them in mathematics, like pretty mechanical stuff. Although that breaks down a bit when you get to things like ratios that like pi, where you've got a infinitely recurring fraction. But yeah, see, I mean, it's not straightforward. Almost everything in this universe is completely not straightforward, and I don't think there's any free lunch in the universe. I think whatever you do in the universe, you can't expect it to look after you. You've got to put the effort in, for whatever reason that is, And I've also put not knowing the future. I think naturally it's sort of immoral to know the future. I don't think it's immoral to predict, but actually knowing the future, that's where the difference is. That seems to be forbidden. That's why we never know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, we can plan and we can try and predict, but that doesn't mean we know. And I don't think we can know as such, really. Or if we do, then I think we're doing something that the universe doesn't want us to. Because otherwise, we'd be able to think into the future, and we can't. Not completely accurately. So, yeah, that's basically all I've really got to say about all of that. The universe is deeply confusing. It scares me actually a lot of the time. It terrifies me from time to time when I really think about it. It's just so confusing. All from the explanation. Oh yeah, I'll put up that little diagram I've got of. I mean, this is my best understanding of how the universe is as the universe is. There's some totally inexplicable infinity that you can't say anything about because it's so different. I mean, that's what the emanation source thing is. Because there's just so many reasons why our ideas just all too often don't work, and that's because the truth, I think, is stranger than we can really truly imagine. That's what the problem is. I mean, because you get a lot of these religions, like they think they've got there, and like they're now like in the divine mind space, and everyone knows everything. They know everything about and I don't think there's any way to get there because our biology is so strong. It strongly drags us always to. And I don't think that necessarily that's a bad thing. And Socrates, Plato, they discuss the body as being a prison. But no, your body makes you to a large extent. I really don't see all this ethereal spiritual stuff as being all that valid to reality. I just don't. All this what's spiritual is if it isn't at least strongly influenced by biology and the physical universe in which we exist, is probably fantasy. This is fantasy land. I mean, a lot of these, I was wondering about this a while back, these out-of-body experiences, whether in fact they're inner-body experiences, or like one goes inside oneself, when you experience these things. I'm not convinced that there is any outer at all whatsoever. The heaven, it doesn't. I think it's the Kabbalion that says it's heavens within yourself. So yeah, I mean, I think the direction may well be wrong. I don't think people should be looking outside themselves. There's the heaven is probably exists within oneself. So yeah, that's about all I've got to say really. You know, so good luck with your lives, and this will probably be my last video along this. I'm going to Africa, and to the Kalahari specifically. So hopefully the next videos I upload will just be all about that, rather than these scary, abstruse, incomprehensible ideas of the universe actually making some kind of sense. So thanks everybody.